Imagine a future where pregnancy is approached with knowledge, confidence, and support. That is the future that we are so excited about. That is the kind of future we are trying to create. And today on the Fearless Future podcast, we're going to talk about the role of education in creating this kind of future. That's what's coming up today on episode 2 of the Fearless Future podcast.
Welcome to the Fearless Future podcast, where your hosts Lisa Canning and Leah Jacobson will explore what the world would look like if women didn't fear pregnancy. Through education, community, and healthcare solutions, Guiding Star Project strives to make this a reality at our physical centers across the United States. Join us.
Leah Jacobson,
Good morning.
how are you doing today?
Good. First day of summer vacation for my kids, so we are just off and running.
Ooh la la. I still have I don't know how many days of school left. I don't even know. I should be in countdown mode now, but yeah, we've got a couple more weeks of school left over here. Episode 2, Leah Jacobson. I am so excited.
Me too. And we're talking about education, which is very appropriate given that we've ended the school year.
And education really, there's I believe it's Sir Francis Bacon, if I'm not mistaken, who said that knowledge is power. And knowledge really is power when it comes to navigating fertility, but especially when it comes to navigating fertility naturally. So I am so excited to get into this. But before we do that, what are you most excited about for the summer, Leah?
Oh gosh, thanks for asking. Time with my kids. I love slow mornings. I love the mornings where we don't have to be running, kids off to multiple different schools. Our 7 children this last year were at 4 different schools, which was just the morning commute was so hectic. And so this morning was that nice slow morning. So I'm excited for slow mornings. I'm excited for lots of reading. Got kids in book clubs. And I'm excited for some camping. My family loves to camp and just get out into nature. So
You have children in book clubs?
yeah, there's a couple book clubs here locally this summer where they're reading 5 books. They meet 5 times throughout the summer and they're reading short little chapter books. And so I'm excited to just, read with them.
Adorable. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. I'm excited. I'm also excited to just I love leisure. I think I love leisure a little too much. I really like working, but leisure just is so nice, quiet and rest. And so everyone who is listening, we hope that you are approaching, if you're listening to this in real time, we hope that you're approaching a season of leisure with your family as well. But time for leisure also means, I don't know about you, but when I'm working out in the garden or I'm just out walking, I listen to a lot of podcasts. And so we are glad that this is landing in your earbuds. And we do want this to be the kind of conversation that we have, not just here in this little space, but beyond. And so perhaps this sparks a conversation with your daughter. Perhaps this sparks a conversation with your spouse, with your friends, with your local healthcare provider, with your community. We really do want this to be the kind of conversation that sparks some significant change in society. So before we get into today's topic of the role of education, why education is so important in creating a future where no woman fears pregnancy, Leah, you stumbled upon something in the New York Times that we want to kind of dig into a little bit first. I'll bring it up on the screen here. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can take a look. But Leah, what are we talking about here? Why is this important to you today?
Well, there was an essay in the New York Times this last week, a week ago Friday, I believe it was. And it was by the very well-known philanthropist and billionaire, the former wife, the ex-wife of Bill Gates, Melinda French Gates. And she submitted an article, an essay into the New York Times. Right here, there it is. The enemies of progress play offense. I want to help even the match. So May 28th is last week. And basically within this essay, she shares how she's going to be dedicating over the next 2 years, I believe, so not a very long amount of time, $1 billion specifically for women's rights, reproductive rights, you can see, including reproductive rights, and programs and nonprofits that advocate for women and girls. And now, first of all, I just want to say, I love what Melinda Gates Melinda French Gates and what Mackenzie Scott are doing right now, kind of in the world of philanthropy. If anyone's been following the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos, the Amazon founder, these ex-wives, I'm kind of just loving them. They not only are they taking a significant portion of money when they're leaving these marriages, they're basically committing to spending it as fast as they can by giving it all away. So I kind of love what they're bringing to the philanthropy world, because the way that they're giving the money as well is removing a lot of barriers that those of us in the nonprofit world, as a nonprofit founder and us working in nonprofits, grants can be such a double-edged type thing. Like you get this grant, but then the amount of reporting or the restrictions around the grant actually don't make it a gift. It actually becomes very difficult to manage your grants. The process of getting the grant can be very difficult, and then maintaining it just sometimes becomes the job of the organization, which can lead you to a mission drift. So I love what they're doing in terms of just basically gifting large amounts of money, millions of dollars, to organizations that didn't even apply. They surprise them with these gifts that are absolutely changing, to the life of the organization. It changes the entire ability for the organization to focus on its work and no longer be dependent upon fundraising. So I say all that because secretly in the back of my mind, I'm like, please, Melinda Gates, please, Mackenzie Scott, like notice us, because what we are doing, we believe, really truly is women's rights, like women's activism in the field that we're in. The problem with this, and the reason that this becomes noteworthy and notable, is that this is a departure from Melinda Gates in particular on her previous stance at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Previously, she has had a very uneasy relationship with abortion. And she's always said, we're not going to really fund abortion directly, even though most people argue that they have. They say, oh, they've been supporting Planned Parenthood, they've been supporting abortion. She has put her focus much more so on access to oral contraceptives, specifically overseas in Africa. So she was very famously rebuked, actually, by some beautiful African women who said, Melinda Gates, we don't want your contraception. We want clean water. We want education. We want the things that actually help us to live a legacy, of motherhood. But nonetheless, she has put millions and millions of dollars through the Gates Foundation into oral contraception into third world countries. Now, this is a departure with her leaving the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So she's stepped down as the co-chair of this organization. She's been at the helm of it for 24 years. She has stepped down, and she is taking her money with her to her own company or foundation. Pivotal Ventures is the name of her foundation. And she has very publicly stated access to oral contraception and abortion rights in a post-Dobbs United States have become her greatest concern to leveling the playing field for women. And so, I can pause there if you want to say anything about that, but I think it's just a really interesting effect, an unintended effect, I think, for those who are fighting against abortion of the Dobbs decision. It's this activation of givers at a very high level to fight back against what they perceive as a restriction on abortion access across the United States. So it's a little bit unfortunate, I think. I want to just talk about it because, first of all, I love how they, as very powerful women, are leveraging their influence, their financial power. They recognize money speaks, and they're able to leverage that kind of unapologetically in a very feminine way by forming relationships with these nonprofits and saying, I want my money to go here. I don't expect anything in return, which I love that so much. It's just such a feminine way.
Okay, so pause. If you could have Melinda French Gates in front of you right here, right now, she listens to this podcast. We're gonna figure this out. I'm gonna figure out a way to get this to work.
Send it to her.
And you could have her for coffee. What would you tell her about oral birth control?
I think it's a challenging situation because she shares very publicly, in her own book, she shares that little pill, like her quote was like, one little pill made it possible for me to space my pregnancies. And she's under a false idea that is the only way to plan your family and to space your pregnancies. And so it's worked for her. So her experience is very loud in her ears, in her life. This has worked for her, that this is what allowed her in some way to be successful in her mind. However, those of us that have never popped a pill and never taken an oral contraceptive in our entire life, we know that that's not the only way to space your children. We know that's not the only way to plan your family. And in fact, becoming dependent upon it and having women of lower economic means dependent upon a pharmaceutical drug is actually not helping them in the long run. Teaching them how their body works, giving them autonomy, giving them self-possession, and the knowledge of their own fertility truly changes the world. That takes it out of someone else's hands and puts it into her hands. That's what I would want her to know.
Rather than relying on a pill, let's rely on knowledge about your body. Like that, I think is the key message for me. So funny story, Leah. As we were getting ready for this interview or for this podcast, I went to Chat GPT like I do often. I have long conversations on Chat GPT when I'm trying to create content because I find if I'm feeling a little bit uninspired, it's a really great way to just sort of start things going. Literally, I have a conversation with Chat GPT. So I asked it today or yesterday, I asked it, what would a future look like if women didn't fear pregnancy?
Ooh.
Fascinating.
Yeah, what's the AI say?
The very first thing it said was like unrelenting or like complete absolute access to contraception. So that's where it led. And it kind of did the typical thing that if you're in the space and you pay attention to the news, it just talked about how it helps for education. It helps for improvement. I know improvement on. If you're,
it makes me so sad.
Watching this, both of us are rolling our eyes and are sad that this is the case with AI. AI has adopted this mentality that many
drink the Kool-Aid.
So then it was interesting. I then said in the next prompt, I said, "What if this was approached with a more natural approach to fertility?" So I think I said those exact words. What if artificial oral contraception was not a part of it, and instead we approached navigating fertility naturally? And it was fascinating because it was just as robust an answer and almost even more robust in the sense that AI was like, women would have more power, more knowledge, more access to information, data. They'd be able to measure signs. And it was almost arguing against its first response that this is the better outcome for women. It actually said the words, this would produce better maternal health outcomes.
Okay. And that's where this all comes down to for me, where I'm looking at her, her essay, and in half of it, she's talking about access to contraception being absolutely necessary to level the playing field. And then she's using supporting evidence in there of, we have the worst maternal outcomes in the industrialized world. And I'm thinking, wait a second. Those two are not really, they are related in the sense that they both are the result of women not trusting and understanding their body. They don't know what's happening. They fear pregnancy. They fear delivery because they fear fertility. We taught them first to be terrified of their fertility. And then we tell them, well, this is also going to be terrifying. So let's put you into a highly medicalized system that has very poor outcomes. And then as a lactation consultant, then I see them after the delivery and they still are afraid and convinced that their body doesn't work. And so now breastfeeding is something they're terrified of as well. And so I'm trying, as I'm reading her essay, I'm trying to get my head around, how can you be so inconsistent? How can you in one breath say, you absolutely need to shut down your fertility because this is a risk to you. And then in the next breath say, but we have terrible maternal outcomes. And I'm not even going to look at the root cause of that. I'm not even going to talk about why our pregnancies are going so horribly and our deliveries are having such terrible outcomes. Well, we got to connect the dots here. We have to connect the dots.
I also would like to do a study. And of course, I'm biased by my own experience. I am a working mother of 10 children. I have built a multi-six-figure entrepreneurial coaching business. I'm the president of this organization, the Guiding Star Project. So I'm obviously a little bit biased in my outlook, but I'd love to see the studies of the women who are, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 children and contributing significantly to society. And and who are contributing to the family's finances, who are contributing to the education of their children. I want to see those studies because I'm not an anomaly. There are
No.
many women
Yeah.
who have raised lots of children,
Yep.
who do things that the world would say are significant. And so I just like, as I was doing all this research, I was like, why are we not talking about the fact that there are natural ways to navigate one's fertility? So perhaps this is a great segue to get into today's topic, Leah, the importance of education and why we believe at the Guiding Star Project that this is such an important tenet in the pursuit of a future where women don't fear pregnancy. So, Leah, where do we begin? Why is education so important?
Okay. I was trying to decide if we start with the women demanding education and demanding the paradigm shift from their doctors, or if we begin from the healthcare side of it and talk about the fact that our doctors are not being properly educated. And I think that is where we begin this thing, because we have to recognize our medical system here in the US is pretty well established. It's most women are going to go to an OBGYN at a hospital setting, to receive their first pap smear, to receive their first, prenatal pregnancy care. And that kind of is just the norm. I think we want to shake up that norm a little bit. I think we want to try to introduce the midwifery model of care in a more legitimate, very safe way to women in the United States. But in the system that we have, most women receive their first education about their body in this setting, in a hospital setting with an OBGYN. And I think about what my dear friend, Dr. Marguerite Duane, founder of the organization Facts About Fertility, has found in her own research when they polled doctors, and these are all doctors, women's health specialist doctors, family practice doctors, that only 3 to 6% of our medical professionals, our MDs in our country, have accurate information about the female cycle, that they understand female fertility and could accurately share that information with their patients. So I think that's where we begin this conversation, is recognizing that the people that we're depending upon to share this information don't have it themselves. They themselves don't know what we need to be taught.
Yeah, I remember when I first met Dr. Duane and heard that statistic, my jaw was like on, the table. We were at this lovely, I remember at a lovely Mexican restaurant, lovely group of women that we were all like, an incredible trained. There were MDs at the table. There were fertility awareness based method practitioners, incredible group of women. And I just was like, that cannot be accurate. Like, you cannot actually tell me that medical students do not get a stitch of this kind of education. And she was like, yeah, most commonly it is not even introduced.
Yep. I remember my husband's an advanced practice nurse. And I remember in nursing school, he was one of 2 male nurses in the class. And he was also, we were newlyweds. We were pretty young and newly married. And the class on labor and delivery, the class on maternal health, that came up in a 1-day lecture. Fertility was a 1-day lecture in the class. And he came home and he was just really kind of disturbed by it, quite frankly, because he said that the question had come up in the class where the professor had asked the students, how could a woman date her pregnancy? How could you tell when she conceived her baby? And the class was just, she said, other than going off her last period, how could you date a pregnancy? And it was just kind of silence. And then, somebody jokingly was like, oh, she only had sex once in the last 5 months. Like that's the only way you could know her conception date, is if she had only had sex in the last 5 months. And my husband, one of the only guys in the class, he raised his hand and he's like, well, you could look at the signs of fertility and cervical mucus and temperature change. And he said it was just like all the eyes just sort of looked at him as if like, are you joking? Like, are you messing with us? Like, that's not possible. Like, that's not real. And he was just so kind of disappointed because he said, I felt like I wasn't able to say anything because I'm the guy, but yet I also felt like none of you know your fertility. Like, how sad is that? Like, none of you have any idea how your bodies work.
Yeah. So just very briefly, just for anyone who might be listening who isn't aware of how one might be able to pay attention to their signs of fertility, Leah, just give us a very brief synopsis of what it means to naturally navigate your cycle.
Oh gosh. Okay. So brief synopsis of this.
Brief.
A brief. Well, basically, the basic information that every young woman should know prior to even beginning menstruating as a little girl, as an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old little girl, the basic information that she needs to understand is that ovulation is the grand event of every menstrual cycle. And it happens somewhere in between the point where you see the menstruation, the bleeding each month, that this event is not going to happen at the same time every month, but that there are very predictable markers that will help her to know when she is ovulating. And it's important for her to know that her hormones are changing all throughout that month. So as a little girl, we begin to understand, I'm going to feel more social and more creative and more outgoing at different points in my cycle. And that doesn't mean that anything about my personality has changed. It doesn't mean that I'm a different person. That doesn't mean that I'm acting or I'm somebody different. It's just that I feel different right now because these are the hormones that are in control at this point in my cycle. And then my hormones are going to start to shift, as my estrogen, that was rising, goes down and my progesterone starts to rise. I'm going to start to feel a little different again, where maybe I'm a little less open, a little less gracious. Maybe I'm a little more short-tempered or maybe not. Maybe I feel sad. Maybe I feel more anxious. Maybe I feel more lonely. And that these are really natural parts of being a woman. And again, there are going to be physical indicators. I can learn to track these indicators if I pay really close attention to my body. If I am able to feel sensations in different areas of my body, my breasts, my genital areas, like my uterine areas. If I begin to really pay attention to myself, my body is speaking to me at all times. It's telling me what's going on. And go ahead.
Navigating fertility and pregnancy and trying to achieve pregnancy or avoid pregnancy, what's really incredible about these different methods is that a woman and a man are looking at physical signs. Things like temperature, things like the consistency, texture of cervical mucus. What else are we looking for? Those are two main markers. Am I missing any?
Well, you can also read your actual hormone markers if you're using certain methods that test your hormones. You can do very non-invasive at-home hormone strips every day. It's like a little pee strip. You just pee on the little strip in your urine, and you can track the levels of hormones that tell you exactly as fertility is approaching. And so for little girls, as you're teaching them these things, I have a daughter that just turned 10. These are conversations we're having right now. You're starting to feel your hormones. You're starting, like, she's all of a sudden like, I don't know why I'm so emotional. And us just reassuring her and saying, it's your hormones, honey. It's okay. Your body is getting ready to be able to make babies. That's going to be a really special part of who you are as a woman. Your body is capable of holding a baby within it, of growing, protecting, taking care of it. That's something that you're going to be able to do. And this is your way of getting ready. And so always connecting what's happening with her period, with fertility, with babies, helping her to keep that all connected is a really important thing that I think has been severed for a lot of women as young girls. Maybe they find out about sex by seeing, unfortunately, maybe they see it first as pornography. Maybe they see it on a movie. Maybe it's that thing that's dirty and they don't get to talk about it. And they don't actually understand that sex connects to the period, connects to making a baby and pregnancy. And so those are very connected concepts that for, unfortunately, many young women, they're three totally disconnected ideas.
Mm-hmm. And in society, we have, in current present day modern age, the Melinda French, kind of worldview, we've disconnected them completely. We have literally said, okay, you can sever them by taking a pill. You can sever them with all kinds of other things. And this is the thing we want to give, especially we at the Guiding Star Project are so excited to give this kind of information and empowerment for girls as young as age 9. And I've come to get to know the Cycle Show, which is a program that, in a really age appropriate, very friendly. We've just published the accompaniment book to
Mhm.
the Cycle Show that has adorable cartoons and helps to express, helps to explain what is happening in the show, quote unquote, of your entire monthly cycle. What is happening? What is happening in your uterus? Like a stage. It's so fascinating the way that it's presented in the book. And so we're talking about education of medical professionals, how that is currently lacking. Let's talk about now where we can have some control, and that is in our daughters. So education for girls as young as age 9, Leah. What do we need to tell them, and why is this so exciting?
Yeah, like kind of what I was just saying, like that, helping them first of all to understand that none of this is dirty. Like we have got to remove any shame that we've attached to female fertility, to the cycle, to menstruation, to periods, like this whole hush hush sort of like get your period and whisper, whisper, don't tell anybody. Like, no, like we have to bring this back where this is something that is celebrated because this is part of her identity. And if part of her feels dirty as a little child, we have set her up for a world of hurt, for a lifetime of hiding parts of herself and not being authentic. God doesn't make mistakes. He made your body this way. This is good. This is beautiful. We're going to take care of it. So that is really where this whole thing starts, with the Cycle Show, with us as parents. And this is prior to age 9. This is our 2, 3, 4-year-old daughters, just reassuring them that your body is not the problem. Like, all these comment or all these, little derogatory things, like colloquialisms, like things that we say, like, oh, she throws like a girl, she runs like a girl. Like it's always meant as an insult. And no, like, I don't know if Lisa, have you seen that one? Somebody did a video in time where they taped teenagers and young adults. Have you seen this one where they say, show me what it looks like to run like a girl? And
Oh,
so young adults and teenagers are like, what does it look like to throw like a girl? And they're like, and then they asked little girls. They asked 4 and 5 and 6-year-old little girls, what does it look like to run like a girl? And they're like, like giving it their all. What does it look like to throw like a girl? And they're like, like they're just like into it. And so something happens right there in that age where shame, deep shame and embarrassment and this negativity of what it means to be a girl is inserted. And I think that this has profound effects on how we feel about ourselves as women, as mothers. I think sometimes we make ourselves, I hear it all the time when I ask somebody, what do you do? Oh, I'm just a mom. I'm just a mom. I'm like, what the heck? Like, what do you do? I'm like, you are a mother. Like, you are taking care of it.
alive. Like that is not a small feat. You keep people alive. And Leah, this is why I'm so excited about programs like the Cycle Show. And I just want to pause to sort of cast vision for a moment. Wherever you're listening about this, whether you have a daughter or not, but just to imagine if a new wave could start today of young girls as young as age 9 and even before, but where they feel like my ability to conceive a baby is spectacular.
Yes.
And just like even those choice of words, my ability to conceive a baby is spectacular.
Yeah.
I was fed all kinds of messages that were like the opposite of that.
Yeah.
That it would have significant ramifications on my career, that it would impede my ability to do anything, that it would be a waste of my education. I got all those messages, and I just want to say it and declare it right here, right now. Imagine our young girls today could feel like it was an empowering accomplishment as opposed to something that could be feared. But what that needs, like what that necessitates, excuse me, what that necessitates is moms like us, like
Yeah.
our generation who are raising the 9-year-olds. We have to have that as a deep belief, a core belief, something that's exciting and motivating. And that can naturally take some time. That can take some time. That can take some healing. We might have things about our own fertility that we're not excited about, or we feel or no, not, they are something to be feared. So it does require a little bit of self-reflection, I think, and I think an open and honest conversation like we're having today, but also just even like with our girlfriends, like in our close communities,
Yep.
the willingness to be able to say, gosh, like, no, actually my fertility, I am actually kind of afraid of it. And be willing to have these conversations, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think I think you're right. It is moms for sure. It's almost like giving permission for our daughters, as I've heard so many women say things like, like they didn't tell their mom they had their first period because they didn't want her to they didn't feel that trust. They didn't feel that safety with their mother. Like, to not tell your mom you had your period, it's kind of a sign to me. And I'm like, whoa, red flags, wounds, like what's going on there? Like, your mom should be that person that you can really bring that to. But I think also us as mothers, like, to give our daughters permission to take care of themselves is important, because sometimes they do have cramps. Sometimes they do need to sleep in or put a hot pack on their tummy or take an Advil, and for us to say, like, it's important for you to care for your body. It's important for you to take care of yourself right now, instead of this like hard driving, always like hide it. Don't let anybody know. Like, you got to go to practice. You got to go do this thing, perform, 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 at the expense of your wellness, at the expense of like hiding the needs of your body. And it's almost like we think that menstruation or like periods or fertility or pregnancy, that those are the things we must hide the most, because of the things that make us like the least, like men, quite frankly. And we're not like men, and that should be celebrated.
And this is again the education piece for adults now, for young women who grow into adults as well. For us to know there are going to be some days of the month where perhaps I'm not going to be my best. I'm always very fascinated by the connection between productivity and work and your cycle. There have been many different people who've written books on this topic,
Yeah.
where when you're ovulating, this is the time when you should be like, on stage, presenting, doing the kind of work that might require convincing or sales, if you will. And then there are other times when it's the time to do the detail oriented, a little bit more quiet, a little bit more reserved. And then there's times where you should be just like lying in bed, like, it's so juice, like to just rest and take it easy. But when you know this, like when okay, I have a presentation at the time of the month when actually I'm going to be the most exhausted, depleted, or a lot of my reserves are going to be drained, I can now plan accordingly. So I can plan with great meals or with extra babysitting or with, whatever else I need for support. That empowerment can change a lot of things, don't you think?
I absolutely agree. And recognizing it under, like, so I do a lot of, presenting, kind of public speaking type stuff. And I've definitely noticed that my ability to sort of like just like nail or wing a talk, like when I'm in that certain like part of my phase, like my follicular phase of my cycle, like it just snaps. It's easy. I can like think of things. My brain is clear. Like I can remember statistics from things I read weeks ago. Towards the end of my cycle, as I start to hit that luteal phase, like into my premenstrual period, I need notes. Like, I need it written down in front of me, because the brain fog is heavy and like I can't even remember what I'm talking about. So I definitely take that into account when I'm speaking, for sure.
I want to pivot the conversation just slightly. I mean, we did talk about it, and honestly, Melinda, if you're listening, like seriously, we want to have a conversation with you because this is such an important aspect. So, Leah, if you were, I'm sure there's people listening who are curious about this topic, but might not be exactly bought in that it's possible to navigate your fertility naturally and effectively. Meaning, what if it doesn't work? Like, isn't it more reliable or convenient to pop a pill and ensure that that fear of getting pregnant is therefore not there because you've popped a pill? What
Well,
what, what guidance would you give to somebody?
well, first of all, I would definitely point towards the effectiveness ratings of birth control methods in general. We know that roughly even birth control pills, even like the insert when you get the oral contraceptive, will say it's 99 to 100% effective with perfect use. with perfect use is a very lofty goal. Even if you're off a little bit on the time of day that you're taking your pill, it can mess up the effectiveness ratings. Also, any other drugs that you're taking, interactions that could be happening with your body, with, maybe you're taking an antibiotic that lessens the effectiveness of this birth control pill. So to think that popping a pill is going to give you 100% certainty that you're not going to get pregnant is very misleading. In fact, they say it's roughly, I believe, up to 9%. I think it's like 6 to 9% is the actual effectiveness rating of the pill. So, I mean, even if we go on the low end of that, 6 out of every 100 women taking oral contraceptives will get pregnant. And so if you have that great of a fear of pregnancy, then you absolutely should not be engaging in the act that leads to pregnancy. I mean, and that is the reality. If we want to talk about actually preventing pregnancy, we have to take accountability for whatever our decision making is. Our sexual decision making needs to be held up as the first line of defense, I guess. And that's where natural fertility really comes in. I think it's so exciting because natural fertility methods, the shift that happens is the understanding is men are always fertile. We know that men have fertility at all times. They're the certainty, like they're the constant. They're always fertile. The decision making comes around the woman's fertility and around the woman's body. So now, sexual decision making in the ideal world, I recognize that rape happens. I recognize that non-consensual or coerced sex happens. However, what we are building up here and what we are saying should be the ideal that we're fighting for is a world where a sexual encounter, the decision making, happens between the man and the woman, where it's not assumed that she's infertile, where the assumption is this act could lead to new life. This could lead to conception of a baby. Where is she in her cycle? And then based upon where she's at in her fertile cycle, decision making around whether you engage in sex happens there, and that it is shared. It is a shared responsibility between men and women. And I think we've lost that really beautiful communication, and we don't even really seem to expect it. Men expect women to be infertile, and women expect men not to care if she's fertile. And that is sad.
I can get very doomsday about these things, Leah Jacobson. Like I can get, if I go down this rabbit hole too much, I can just get like, and we're done. Society's over. I throw my hands in the air. But I'm going to pull myself away from that because, again, knowledge is power, right? And I think it will take a massive amount of societal shifting. But it takes things like the Guiding Star Project. It takes these different organizations that will say, hey, listen, not only are we going to give you the education, but we're also going to wrap our arms around you. We're going to help you navigate it. We're going to listen to you when you feel like it's hard or you feel some fear. We're going to do this alongside you. And then, of course, and we're going to get into this, I'm sure, in this podcast, but a different approach to the way that we treat women who are menstruating at work, the way that we treat women who are menstruating, lactating, and who are pregnant in all elements of society. It will take a lot of these things to create this kind of culture. But education, I think, is the place where we begin. So I do want to share one really practical resource, and that is something called SymptoPro. So as we were sharing earlier, there are different ways that one can navigate markers, right? You can key on the little test strips. You can measure your hormone levels. You can look at your temperature, and you can look at physical markers like your mucus. And one of the things that people can learn. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I've never learned how to navigate my cycle naturally, SymptoPro is one of the ways that you can learn via an online course, and you get the access to a guide as well, so that you can get this knowledge of when am I actually able to conceive a child, at what point in my cycle, what are these different markers that I'm looking for, how does this actually work. And so you can go on our website, we have the link below wherever you're watching or listening to this, to learn about SymptoPro and invest in an online program that will help you to navigate your cycle naturally. Leah, you want to
Yeah,
add?
I love SymptoPro. SymptoPro is one of the symptothermal methods. So there's kind of basic categories now of fertility awareness methods. You may have heard of, NFP, natural family planning. You may think that it's the rhythm method from like the 1950s, where you just assume that there's certain days on the calendar where you're going to get pregnant, and we've known for a very long time that that actually is very inaccurate, and it's likely to cause you to get pregnant. And so if you've ever heard that sort of stigma about, well, natural family planning is just a natural way to get pregnant, and no, that's not true. Modern methods of natural family planning, or fertility awareness based methods, are what they typically are called now. They have effectiveness rates that are in the same of artificial methods, synthetic artificial birth controls. We're looking at 98 to 99% accuracy for some of these methods with perfect use, which with perfect use is going to be the timing of when you're having sexual intercourse. So that's really the difference between a natural method and an artificial method. A natural method is not going to change your hormones. It's not going to alter or suppress or make your body, it's not going to flood you with synthetic hormones. It's going to just let your natural hormones guide your cycle, and you are going to track it, and you are going to time whether or not you are sexually active in accordance with what your desired outcome is. And so that's important to note too. These methods are highly effective at not only avoiding pregnancy, but also achieving pregnancy, because there are a lot of couples struggling with infertility. And you're going to really struggle to get pregnant if you are mistiming your intercourse. If you're not having sex on your most optimal days, it's going to be really hard to get pregnant. So natural fertility methods are really good at that. They're really good at teaching you, here's your fertile window. This is the best time, go. Or this is the riskiest time, no, based upon what your intended outcome is. So different SymptoPro is the one that we offer through our website, through partnership with that organization. And it's a symptothermal method. So it pays very close attention to the signs your body is giving you. All of your natural hormones are putting out natural signs. So everything from cervical mucus, a wetness, a slipperiness to your mucus, to breast tenderness, to uterine pain, to the temperature change. The temperature actually jumps about 1 degree when you ovulate. So that's a really reliable marker that if you're checking your temperature at the same time every day, you're going to see it. And there are so many awesome like femtech devices on the market now that do this work for you. And I've said this for a long time, like if we got our smartwatches really engaged in this, like I'm certain that Fitbit and Apple could tell you when you ovulate. I am certain of it, because they are collecting so much information just, from our little wearable. There's so many devices now that can help us to observe this information. But I still think it's so important that we not become reliant upon anything other than our own, intuition and our own observation of ourselves, because we are smart enough to figure this out. We can do this. We can figure it out.
Smart. Women are smart. We have brains. We are smart. Okay, so we've talked about educating young girls. We've talked about educating the medical, system, and we were so grateful to the work of Dr. Marguerite Duane and her entire team at FACTS. We've talked about educating women, and we've talked about educating those who might not have the same opinion of us, those who might feel like popping a pill is something more convenient, more safe. Is there anyone else that needs education, Leah, that we want to talk
Oh, yes, everybody. But I would say in particular, men. I think you and I have both been able to successfully. Well, it's funny. Like, you have 10 children. I have 7 children. And so people may look at us and be like, that is not what I want. Like, I'm not signing up for that. But we have used natural fertility methods to space our pregnancies. And I'm pretty certain that I would have 15 children if we had not used natural fertility methods, because we are blessed with really good fertility. We are really blessed. We've got great fertility, in fact. And so we have used NFP very successfully to space our children. But I will say it is my husband's awareness, and it is my husband's ability and willingness to work with me that makes it possible for us to use this method. It requires men to understand that they are the constant, they are always fertile. And it requires them to recognize that they're not always going to be able to just have sex whenever they want. Like, it requires cooperation, and it requires a reverence, in a sense, for their partner's body and fertility. And so men need to know this more than anyone.
We're on the Steubenville, Franciscan University of Steubenville campus for something called Women's Health Week. And I knew we would get a lot of women, but I was incredibly surprised at how many men, young men, consistently showed up for this 5-day live event. And it was interesting. We've got a couple videos that we've recorded of them, we'll share on a future podcast, where they all said, if I want to be able to support my future spouse in this, I need to understand it. And I was just like, good on you, because that was not my experience growing up. Like, I wasn't aware of any of these things. I wasn't really paying attention. And my male friends, we weren't having these kinds of conversations. So yeah. I was really quite impressed that these young men were showing up. Like, and I remember the most popular, they were all pretty popular, but just the one day where we had Jamie Rachi present, and it was a very more technical, I would say, presentation on the cycle and what's happening at every point. And that was packed with men and women.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think young men want to do better. I think they don't like being left out of this conversation. They really were removed from the decision-making and from the conversation with the oral contraceptive pill. It became a women's issue, became a women's rights issue, even though fertility is a shared function between men and women. Men's voices were really removed in many ways because, I mean, for a lot of reasons, women thought and assumed that men were only interested in one thing, and it wasn't her well-being. And so I think we need to restore that balance and say, no, we believe men are capable of this. Like, we know men are capable of supporting and coming alongside us with this. And that's the viewpoint that we're going to continue to hold. I mean, you kind of, I don't know if manifest is the right term here, but you kind of create the reality around you of what you believe. And if you believe that all men are awful and you don't expect them to learn these things, you don't expect them to work with you, that might be the reality you end up with. Versus if you expect them and you're going to talk about this openly and you're going to invite them in, they might rise to a different level.
Our thoughts really matter. Similarly, if you think my period is awful and something to hate, well, that's going to have some pretty important implications on you. And similarly, if you think pregnancy is to be feared, that's going to be a lot of negativity to navigate,
Yeah.
And that's why we're doing this podcast. That's why we're so excited about these conversations. And I think I just want to end on this note, Leah, of if our generation today, of those of us who are raising the 9-year-olds and the 9-year-olds as well, if this was the beginning of beautiful messaging of what an accomplishment, your body is good, pregnancy and fertility is a superpower and not something to be feared. What's the outcome of that, Leah?
Well, it's funny because I think the other side, like, the side, I think when you mentioned that your AI, that your chat GPT gave you 2 totally different versions that were very robust arguments, very filled out, 2 different worldviews, that's absolutely true. There are 2 very robust sort of worldview ideas on this. And what's going to happen is that we're going to see one rise. We're going to see this, and it's a much smaller worldview right now, I think, held by fewer people. But we're going to begin to see this worldview become much more established, which would then affect the policies that are in place, the laws that are in place. And the fear, that a Melinda French Gates has right now in this moment is because they are seeing some of these laws being dismantled, some of these policies being challenged. And they're not understanding that what comes behind that then is a change of policy. It's not just that the Dobbs decision came down and Roe versus Wade fell. Like, what needs to follow that, what must follow that, are maternal health policies, our workplace policies, our parental leave policies. Like, that's where the attention needs to go now. It should not be wasted, I don't feel, on trying to rebuild and prop back up and trying to sustain this worldview that really is dying. People are hurt by this worldview. They don't want this worldview. It's not empowering. As the other worldview begins to grow, we're going to see the organic, systemic change that goes along with supporting that worldview. We can't just say no more abortion, no more contraception, and not address the maternal mortality rate, and not address breastfeeding laws, and not address motherhood rights and family rights. That's what has to happen.
And create that kind of support. Well, help us grow this movement, help us grow this worldview. And you can do that very practically by joining us in the Guiding Star Academy. You can visit bit.ly/Guiding Star Academy to continue this conversation. The first Wednesday of the month, we gather for a live, very intimate conversation on women's health and policies, how to advocate for yourself, conversations like how to have the conversation with your daughter about her first period. It's completely free to join. And so we invite you to join us. It's bit.ly/Guiding Star Academy. Leah, any final words before we say goodbye today?
Mackenzie Scott and Melinda French Gates, I really invite you to look further into the important work of building up the midwifery model of care and birthing centers and fertility support and everything women need to not fear pregnancy, because organizations like ours could really use the gifts that you are giving to nonprofits across the country. So everyone pray with us that we can catch the eye of some billionaire philanthropists.
And a reminder, you can visit any of our Guiding Star centers across America where you can work with, one-on-one, a fertility awareness based practitioner who can help you to navigate your cycle naturally. Imagine if we expanded to every United State in America.
It's time. I think it's time.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on the Fearless Future podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with a friend. Please subscribe. Please subscribe and join us in this movement wherever you are listening or watching to this. We are live every Monday at 11 a.m. East for conversations like this one on the future of women's health, as well as what we can do in the present. Everybody, have a great day, and we'll see you on the next one.